Welcome to the Binge Readers Diary, a subset of this channel where I talk about the stories I'm currently exploring. For our first video, I'm going to do a classic booktube video. It's a wrap up for the first 3 months of this year. Every book I've read from January to March. So I guess let's just dive in. Firstly, we have Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is an autobiography by her. Tells the story of her life, her childhood, how she grows up, obviously, her education, and how she met Barack, tenure as First Lady of the United States of America, the projects she put in place, her views and such. This book is interesting to me. Mostly, okay, I got to look at things through a whole new perspective. Firstly, the Black American life, and I guess deep inside we all yearn for a bit of history of our own. The classic question: where do I come from? What life did my ancestors live? So she talks about this when she speaks of when slavery was abolished and blacks got the ability to travel from the south. I'm not sure if I get this wrong, I'm sorry, but to move from there's a state that has heavy black that had a lot of slaves, and they were able to cross and move to other parts of the country. But there's a moment she speaks of looking at your roots, having to go and visit your the grandparents' place and thinking this is where we came from. But it's also interesting because there's a moment where they visit Kenya, because Barack's parents are Kenyan, at least his dad is from Kenya, and it's interesting to look at Michelle's perspective through that experience. It's extra interesting for me. She also speaks of the idea of feminism. I guess this is the book that has kicked off feminism for me. I honestly have never given that much thought. Yeah, true. But I've been thinking on the subject heavily for the past 3 months. Feminism, yeah. She speaks of the post as First Lady. It's this weird place between being a shadow to the president and also having to step out of said shadow and make your own mark. Do something, not just be supportive and such, but have your own identity. It's a really well written book. I would highly recommend it, if only for the experience. So moving on, we have The Housekeeper and the Professor. This is a really great story. I need to read more Japanese literature, because this book by Yoko Ogawa is great. It tells the story of the professor and the housekeeper, though mostly we get the story from the housekeeper's point of view. First of all, we never get any names of the characters. We don't get the name of the professor or the housekeeper, but the story is centered around those two characters plus the housekeeper's son. The professor gives this boy a name, and we just call him Root. So this is a really interesting story in that it speaks of maths and makes me want to love maths more than I do. I used to call it the magic of mathematics because okay, this is the premise of the story. So the professor is this brilliant mathematician who got into an accident that led to some sort of brain injury, so that his memory wanes after a certain number of minutes. So every day he wakes up and he starts on a blank slate. The only thing he remembers are his life to that moment of the accident. Everything else that has happened just evaporates. And I think I've seen this idea in a movie. Only in that movie, the man's memory lasted for a day, and that was a love story. But in this, it's not a day; it's a couple of minutes, and this was so sad. There's a scene where they describe the housekeeper describes the professor waking up because okay, he has no memory of his past, so he leaves notes stapled onto his suit so that he just periodically checks them and is like it's so sad. I just cannot imagine how it makes me think of things like identity. Who are you? Who are we without our memory? It just leaves no room for development. I mean, you have to start from blank every day. And what effect does this have on the people around a person? On such a person, especially that moment. There's this moment when you realize, oh, I'm broken, or as in, that's a wrong statement to use. This moment when he realizes that his memory is gone, that he you wake up 4 years later and you realize time has passed and you can't remember nothing of its passing. Well, nothing really happens in this story. It's just as in plot wise, not much happens. We just get to spend time with these characters and get to know them and see them grow and retract and grow and retract. And I like it. I didn't know that I would love such a story, but I absolutely loved it. Oof. Let's move on. I don't want to talk about it more, but yeah, this is a great story. This is a great story. Hmm. Oh, and then we have in Watermelon Sugar. This is the song that. This is the story that inspired the song Watermelon Sugar. Is it by Harry Styles? I think. And in Watermelon Sugar is a strange, strange story. Honestly, okay, this is magical realism, I guess. I'm not really good with the whole genres thing, but I think this is magical realism. Honestly, what happened in this story? It's this society. I don't know. I think it's in the future, and they were battling with the tigers. I honestly, I have no way of describing this story because it's told from the perspective of this man who wants to write a story. Okay, so it seems like no stories have been written for a long, long time, and then this man decides that he's going to write a story because somehow he's different, and he sort of talks of tigers and how the tigers killed his parents, and how when the tigers came they could talk and they could sing, and they told him, hey, we want to eat your parents, but we are not going to eat you because you are too young. And then when they when they started eating this boy's parents, they tell him, please go outside, we don't want you to be scarred by this memory. And the boy goes outside and he hears the tigers singing as they're eating his parents. And when they're done, they step out of the house, and they tell the boy, we are really sorry for having to eat your parents. I mean, we are tigers, what else are we going to eat? You understand, right? And the boy is like, yeah, yeah, I understand. Okay, this was just a strange story. That is as much as I can say. This was strange with a capital S. Oh, then I read Piranesi, and Piranesi was wonderful. I think it's a sequel, or okay, it's not really strongly as a sequel. It can be read as a standalone, but I think the author uses the same characters she used in a previous book. Mr. Norrell and something. That's the previous book. But Piranesi is wow. I just this is the premise of the story. We have you have this man who seems to be suffering from the same case as the guy as the professor in the previous book, but he has no memory of himself. Okay, why am I? I'm not saying this right. So the story starts off in this with this scene. This man is waiting for a flood, and when the flood comes, he climbs up high on these statues and watches the waters rush up the stairs and claim the lower levels of the house, the capital T, the house. It's told in this almost mythological style, so it feels like mythology in a way, like a story that's being told by the Greeks or something. Then you realize that this house, the entire world is this house. Everything that is something is contained within this house, and so this man explores the house. He is sort of the keeper of the house, but he is the only human being alive. Well, except for the other. So he is the only one alive plus the other. And he gets he okay, this house, it's like a gigantic building. The lower levels are full of water, and occasionally they flood, as in the waters rise up and flood the house. The lower levels, the higher levels, and then the highest levels are sort of like the skies and such. There are no animals. There are only every the house is just filled with alcoves. The alcoves have statues. So statues of everything, from satires to just normal people, from almost to mosaics, carved mosaics, and everything. That is everything contained within the house. But he has managed to find some remnants of people, bones, and he realized that these are the only. Are they 7 or 8 or 9 people to have those are the only people that have ever existed. So I went into this story without reading the blab. So it was really interesting to discover all these things because I didn't know where this was going. And when it just switched back, and I mean, the conclusion of the story shocked me. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. I wasn't expecting things to go in that direction. At the end of it all, though, all I can say is everybody needs their own world to escape into. Although, permit me to go into minor spoilers, because I don't. Let me not spoil it. Let me not spoil it. Maybe I'll have a dedicated video where I talk about this, because I can just ramble about it all day. Let me not spoil it. We'll talk about that later. So next up was Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is a book that's been on my radar for a while because everyone just praises it. I know there's a show that's been made. Haven't watched it, and honestly, I don't know if I should. Normal People is praised for its people. Let me see. How did I feel about this book? Complicated. Yes, I got attached to the characters, and I guess that was the point of it. But I didn't like how I felt after reading the story, because I felt a bit hopeless, a bit, I don't know. How do I describe this feeling? So, Normal People tells the story of two kids. It starts off as they are concluding high school and they are going, okay, something like the last year of high school. there are these two awkward kids. The girl is pretty smart, the boy is also very smart, and they get into a relationship. But the boy is like very conscious. Okay, he's a football player and he's very conscious of what people think of him. And this girl is a recluse. Okay, her parents are rich. Oh my god, I'm thinking about it and I feel like crying. uh the girl is she keeps to herself most of the time. Other kids at school are like think of her as very strange and such, so she's ostracized. It happens that this boy's mom, he's raised by a single mom, so she works as a maid for this girl's house, for this girl's parents. The girl's family is rich, they live in a mansion and such. So every day after school, the boy comes to pick up his mom from the girl's place, and as he's waiting, they talk, and that's the extent of their relationship. That's and the boy is sort of afraid of people realizing that, oh, he talks to this girl, and I'm like, but they fall into a relationship, and I'm like, I'm a sucker for romance. I'm always cheering people on. I'm like, yeah, I hope you're happy. I hope you get your happy ever after. But things hardly ever go that way, do they? This boy messes up, like really messes up everything. That by the end of part one of this book, it is why he messes things up colossally. And at that point, I just really hated this guy. Like I disliked him completely because he did something really shitty. But by end of part one, we are moving on into college. So in college, things they go to Trinity College in Dublin, and both of them applied to it. Both of them get their chance to go there, and in Trinity, things okay. There's no point in me explaining everything that will happen in this story, but from this point on, things flip. They get back together, and their relationship becomes this cycle of we'll get together, let's not mess things up again, and then they mess things up or something happens, and they drift apart, but they always drift back together, and it's frustrating as hell, but it's also, I guess, I don't know, I guess it's the OTP trope, one two pairing trope, where they're like, we might move away from each other, but we'll always drift together again. But it's also pretty messy because, okay, I've had someone talk of it and say that this book takes it just focuses on communication, how we aren't really good at communicating. I can attest to the truth of that. I'm not good at communicating with, even with the people that I love personally. That's a failing, but it just takes it on a whole other level where something small becomes a misunderstanding, and it's not okay. Most people, when you speak of the miscommunication trope, most people are annoyed by it, but in this book, it's done, I guess, delicately is not the right word, because you are in the guy's head and you see how awkward he is, how insecure he is, and he wants to say something, but for some reason he doesn't, and yeah, I found myself doing that a lot, and then it just messes things up for the next, I don't know, 3 years or so. And obviously the story is not concluded. After reading it, I was frustrated by the fact that there is no real conclusion to the story, because it ends with them drifting apart again, and I'm like, I know you guys will just get back together, and you just continue messing each other up. But then I'm like, I want them to just settle down, and I guess grow up. I'm not happy with the idea that this is what my future might look at. Humanity, we have messed up people. So because when they're together, I'm like, aren't you guys happy? Why don't you just stick with this? Anyway, let's not talk about that anymore. Normal People by Sally Rooney. I could go on and on. there are so many moments, especially the girl, because there are moments where she just describes herself in words that are just. Anyway, let's move on. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Normal People by Sally Rooney. Done. Next up is the Atlas 6, and this was something of a surprise because okay, I knew people loved it, but I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was.